Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today we are ready to start planting seeds for my 2024 garden. Now, I'll link a video up above. It was just the last video that I did that talked about how I plan on which seeds that I'm going to plant. Now, I am not going to plant a lot of them. I'm just going to plant the seeds that can go out really early for really early cool spring crops. And actually, even my cabbage and kohlrabi will not be planted by seed until next month. Tomatoes and all of those kind of warm weather crops are going to be planted a little bit later, maybe the end of March, the beginning of April. So I'm going to show you which seeds I'm going to plant, show you the supplies that I have, and talk a little bit about planting seeds. Now, this time of year is always exciting for me. This is the time of year where the new life out in my garden gets to begin, even though it's cold and snowy outside. So let me show you what we're going to plant. So right here, I have my lettuce. This lettuce has had about 3 cuttings. We can get maybe 1, possibly even 2 more cuttings on this before it starts to kind of decline. Now, when I say decline, you'll have less and less growth, and it'll get a little bit more bitter. So this is how I grow my salad over the winter. So we're going to plant another crop to be ready for when this one's done. So this is the lettuce that we're going to use. I always like to include a mesclun. Now, this mesclun doesn't have arugula in it, and I love arugula, so we're going to add a little bit of the arugula to that. We're also going to use this gourmet salad mix that I've really enjoyed. So that's going to be our salad, and that's going to be grown indoors. Next, we're going to start some vegetables for outdoors. I have an empty low hoop house that I would like to try and see if I can plant spinach in early and see what happens. We're going to start these indoors, and I'm going back and forth, and maybe I'll just do it both ways. But I have a real hard time getting spinach to germinate indoors. The best success I've had is to start them in a plastic baggie with a wet paper towel. So I think I'm going to try both. I think I'll try them in my soil pots over here, and then also try it with the wet paper towel and see which one works best. We're also going to start some red scallions, Italian scallions, and I absolutely love these. I grew these last year and they were amazing. To continue on with the allium or the onion theme, we're going to plant my favorite onions. I only grow the white and yellow sweet Spanish onions. They do really well in my climate, and I love the flavor, so I don't see any reason to change. And then the red onions, I've been kind of going back and forth. I've only grown red onions for the last couple of years, and I really like this Brunswick onion that I've grown. I may change that up next year, but this is what I'm going to grow this year. Next, we're going to do Swiss chard. I've been growing the 5-color beets, which is basically a rainbow chard. But what is happening with that is I only get a few of the yellow, a lot of the white, and then some pink, and I don't get the really red color. So we're going to separate these out and grow, I think, 3 or 4 cells of each color, because I love the mix of colors. And these will be used to eat, and they will also be used to plant out as ornamentals in my front yard. Now let me show you what I already have growing indoors. So this is what I have indoors. They're just getting a little bit tall, and the production is kind of slowing down a little bit. These were planted in pots in September, and these were just the leftovers for the ones that I put outside to overwinter. The ones that I have outside overwintering are growing too slowly to really harvest off, and that's because of the lack of light and the cold. The next thing I'm going to plant is kale. Now, I use kale as an ornamental and also to harvest off. I actually have some indoors here. You can see how tall these are getting. They're getting way too tall for this area, and I'm afraid I'm just not going to be able to have the room to harvest anymore, because you harvest the lower leaves, and as you harvest the lower leaves, you start getting bare stalks. Now, one other thing I could possibly do is come in here and cut them back and let them grow back, but I think what I'm just going to do is start over. Now, these will stay here, and I'll harvest off them until the new ones are large enough to start harvesting off. And then once it's time, these will end up moving outside. So we're going to use them both indoors and outdoors. Now, if I was going to use these only for outdoors, I wouldn't start these this early, because they're going to get quite large. So this is what I'm going to be starting indoors, and let me show you the supplies that I have. Now, the first thing that I'm going to talk about is this tray. I absolutely love this tray, and I think the only place I've ever seen it offered is at a local nursery. They had it. This is where I bought mine, is a local nursery. And if you're local to Utah County, it was Sun River Nursery. And then I've seen them in Johnny Seeds catalogs. So this is a great way to be able to handle soil indoors. It's also great to be able to handle it outdoors too if you want to contain the mess. These are my seed starting trays. These right here are Epic Gardening's Epic 6-cell pots. Absolutely love them, and they have seed starting mix in them. Now, seed starting mix works really well for smaller seeds and just to get seeds to germinate better. Now, this seed starting mix does not have any nutrients in it. So once they sprout and have their first true leaves, we're going to need to move the plants from this pot into a larger pot. Now, the larger pots that I like to move them into, I got these at Greenhouse Megastore. They're quite inexpensive and they last for years. But this is a 4-inch pot, and this is a regular seed starting mix. Now, I actually made this seed starting mix, but you can use any seed starting mix that you like. So once the plants in these pots get their first true leaves, we're going to need to move them into regular pots with regular potting soil. Now, the difference between seed starting mix and regular potting soil is the potting soil has compost and maybe a little bit of fertilizer in it. Now, this is homemade potting mix. Any potting mix would work, but it is really good to try to get some with some sort of fertility in it so that your seeds can have nutrients they need to grow. And once they get large enough in these pots, even though my potting soil has fertility in it, I am going to be adding fertilizer so that they can have good, consistent growth. Seed starting mix does not have any fertility in it because you want it to be as sterile as possible so you can avoid any fungal diseases that happen to seedlings. Now, this is where I'm going to start my onions. This is a method I trialed last year and it worked beautifully. So this is just a very shallow tray. Let me see if I can pull it up here. It's a very shallow tray that's nesting inside this regular tray. And I divided it into 4 sections. We're going to have the bunching onions in this one, the red scallions. We're going to have the Spanish white in this row, the red onions in this row because the bottom turns red, and then I can tell the difference between the white onions and the yellow onions. And then I dug a trench and added a string. The string decomposes and you don't end up being able to see it later, but it actually works quite well to keep the varieties separate. And this is about all the onions I'll be able to use during the year. Now, I have not had luck at all starting onions in regular seed starting mix in these smaller trays. They seem to like to grow in larger containers. Now, I've been starting seeds indoors for the last 5 years, and I've had time to purchase a lot of the stuff that I want to use. When I first started growing seeds, I started them in cups, I started them in containers that I repurposed from the kitchen, and I bought the cheapest potting soil I could get. I also tried starting seeds in windows and had varying rates of success. So what I'm actually trying to say is you don't need to spend a lot of money to start seeds. You just need to find the proper conditions in your home and find out what works for you. And then purchase other things for seed starting little by little. See what works for you. Everybody seems to do it different. So now that we know what I'm going to be using, let's get planting some seeds. So let's start the onions first. We're going to start with the Spanish yellow, which is on this side. What I'm going to do is move some of the soil to the back right here. Try not to fill my trench too much. Move it to the back. Then onion seed does not stay viable for very long. This packet is almost 2 years old, which means that the viability is starting to go down. And when I say viability, I mean that these onion seeds are going to have a smaller percentage of them sprout. If I have onion seeds that are 3 years old, I usually end up tossing them because they don't usually sprout. But since these are 2 years old, we're going to plant quite a bit of them. And if they all sprout, that's okay, because the way you handle onion seeds is you have a large amount of them that sprout. You let them grow on together, and then you take them and divide them out later when you plant them into the garden. Now, if you look at the back of the onion seed packet, and I don't know how well you can see that, but it says that they need to be buried 1/4 of an inch. Now, I've found that onion seed does not like to be planted very deeply at all. So some of these seeds are exposed. I'm going to try to make sure most of them are buried. And then after we're done putting all the seeds in, what we're going to do is we're going to cover them with vermiculite. Now, vermiculite is an expanded volcanic rock, kind of a minerals type thing, that is that has expanded, and by expanding, it's increased the surface area inside the material. Now, because it has expanded open area inside of the material, it can soak up quite a lot of water and it can soak up nutrients, and then it slowly releases them. By using vermiculite, you reduce the amount of fungal diseases that happen, and it also helps cover the seeds but still allows a little bit of light in so that they can germinate better. And I found that I have much better germination and far less damping off disease, which is a fungal disease, with my seedlings. So we're going to be covering everything with vermiculite after we're done planting. The next thing is going to be my red Brunswick onions. We're going to do the same thing, very carefully move some soil to the back here so we can have soil to cover everything up with. The seed is only a year old, so we're not going to plant it as thickly, but we're still going to put in a good amount of seed. And then just divide them out when we plant them in the garden. We're going to cover those up, pat it down just a little bit. Make sure our trenches are still there. That's why I put the string, is so that I don't lose my trenches. Then we're going to do the Spanish white. Use my older seed first. Let me pull the soil back again. Pat them down, and now we're going to find this red bunching onions, the red scallions. Now we're going to cover the planted areas with vermiculite. Now, another reason I love growing these onions that I didn't mention before is that I love how long they last in storage. I harvested my onions that I grew last year, which were these exact same varieties. I harvested them last July, and I'm just eating up the last of them. There's only been a few that have sprouted, and they were still good. You know, I've been watching them very carefully. If I see any that show any chance at all of softening or sprouting, I eat those first. But I'm still eating them, and that's a good amount of time for them to last. So now let's start with, let me see, what should we start with? Let's start with the kale, since the kale is right here. I absolutely love scarlet kale. I love it for the color, and I love it for the ornamental value. Actually, I think what we're going to do is start 3 cells of these, but we're going to put 2 or 3 seeds in them, and then we can divide them out afterwards. So I've got my little planting tool. We're going to put a hole in the center. And then the back of the seed packet says plant them 1/4 of an inch, so we'll plant them at 1/4 of an inch. Now, unlike with the onions, we do not want to overplant these pots. 2 or 3 seeds, depending on the age of your seed, is all that you should be putting in there. And then, like I said, after they've sprouted, if you have more than 1 sprout, you can actually divide them out and put them into larger pots. So this is kind of a way to save seed starting mix. Not that it's that expensive, but it saves seed starting mix. So we're going to make holes for the blue curly kale, which I also love for the ornamental value. Gorgeous, and it's delicious. Actually, I think this packet is older. Let's use this packet up. I'm going to put a few more in here because this seed packet is quite old. Because you really don't need to put that many seeds in each hole, and you don't need that much kale. So one seed packet of kale can last you a long time. I think this packet right here is probably 4 years old right now. And we had really good germination rates in the fall. Next, we're going to do a full thing of mixed kale. This is from Snake River Seed Cooperative, and what it is, it's a seed cooperative in Idaho, And what they do is they just continually grow kale. Whatever survives the winter there, they collect the seed and then replant it. So it's basically what you call land race. They're just taking what is the hardiest, what survives the best, and then planting the seed of that over and over again. So this is landrace kale, very cold hardy. I've had them survive the winter. The thing is it's a mix and you never know what you're going to get out of it. So I like to plant several of them and then choose one of each. The seedlings come out looking different from each other. Now, the bad part about it is I can't tell you what varieties they are. Let's see if it says. No, it doesn't even have any of the varieties listed on this. So I don't know what the actual varieties are, but I do know that they turn out really great. And I don't know if you can see, but the seeds, each of the seeds look a little bit different. So we'll put 2 or 3 in each hole and hope we get a good mix come up. Now we may need to pause here. I'm suffering a little bit of kitty paralysis. Maybe you can see my light too. I'm suffering from a little bit of kitty paralysis. I don't want to move him. He looks so happy and comfortable. He loves sitting here with me, so we may have to wait until he's done, which may be a while. Okay, so I was able to sneak a little bit of Vulcan chard out from under Gigi's head without disturbing him, so we can start planting this one at least. This is going to be my red Swiss chard. We're only going to plant 3 cells of this because you really can have too much chard, but it is absolutely gorgeous. Now the seeds from Swiss chard definitely look different than kale. It looks more like beet seeds because I think they're related to beets. Next we're going to do the white Fort Hook giant chard. Absolutely delicious chard. And next we're going to do the Oriole orange. Next, as soon as I can get my cat off the spinach, we're going to start spinach in cells. We're going to do quite a bit of them because, like I said, I have a hard time with germination rates. So we're going to do 2.5 6-packs of it, and then we're going to start some just in case in a paper towel. He is so comfortable. How could you move a face that cute? Okay, success. Kitty is still comfortable, and I was able to retrieve seeds. So I think we're going to do 2 or 3 seeds in each cell. Let's see if we can get some germination with these. Okay, I've got 3 seeds in each cell. Let's see if we can get germination. We're going to cover these with vermiculite, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to start the spinach in a paper towel. So let's get these all covered. There we go. Everything is planted up. So the last thing we need to do is to give these a good soak with my spray bottle. Now all of the soil is already wet. I like to pre-moisten everything because if you don't pre-moisten the soil, a lot of times you have a hard time with the water soaking in, and it actually floats on top and sometimes can actually float the seeds out of the soil. So let's go and water this down pretty good. Make sure they're well watered in. Then I'm going to put a dome over the top and put them under the lights and we'll be good to go. Now I'll be watering these with the spray bottle until they sprout. Once they sprout, then I'm going to be using bottom watering to water these. Now the only issue with this tray right here that's hanging over the top of the other tray is I do need to top water this tray from now on because it's not deep enough. It doesn't go all the way down to the bottom of the other tray. Now it does have holes in the bottom, so it does drain well, and I found that my onion seeds sprout a lot better in this open tray. Now that they've had a good soaking, it's time to put the dome over the top. This is to keep the humidity in the tray and make it so that they don't dry out as fast. It also keeps it nice and warm. Now, onions and kale and chard, they like to germinate at cooler temperatures. My grow room currently stays around 70-75 degrees, which is warmer than the rest of my house. The rest of my house stays in the 60s. But it's warm enough to germinate these seeds and cool enough that they will actually germinate. So now that we've planted all those other seeds, now it's time to start my lettuce seeds for my salads for indoors. Now these are going to be grown on a wicking mat, and I love growing lettuce on wicking mats because you just fill the tray full of water and you only need to do that about once a week. The lettuce roots spread over the wicking mat and get just the amount of water that they need, and not too much and not too little. If you don't water your lettuce enough and you have it wilt in between waterings, a lot of times it ends up getting bitter. So we don't have bitter lettuce this way, but we're not going to fill the tray with water until after the seeds sprout. Because if you add the water too early and the soil stays too wet, you end up getting damping off. Now the way I plant lettuce is I do surface sow a lot. What I do is I just go through with my little tool, mess up the soil a little bit so there's holes for the seed to fall in. And then when I spread the seed over the top, I just tamp it down. So let me get the soil all ready, and then we'll show you how we plant the seeds. So now the soil is nice and loose, we can add the seed. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to mix a little bit of the arugula into the mesclun mix, and we're just going to do one row of those, because when I harvest my lettuce, I just cut a row at a time, maybe 2 rows at a time. That will give me a little bit of the mesclun, which is a spicier mix, and more of the lettuce. So right here, I have a little bit of the arugula. Let's just pour some of the mesclun mix. And as I said, it's a mix, so there's all sorts of different seeds in there. Mix it all up, and then we're going to spread it evenly over the top. Try to get some of everything in there. And as you can see, since the soil is so loose, we're having the seeds fall down into the soil. So they're going to get the proper depth placement, and we're going to have good germination on that. So this is the lettuce mix that we're going to use. It has all different colors, a few different textures, and we're going to spread them evenly over the top. We're going to spread it pretty thick, but not too thick. We want good even germination of all the different types. And then we're going to pat everything down. We're not going to compact it. We're just going to make sure that we get good contact with the soil and the seeds. And then once again, we're going to add vermiculite. Spread it over the top. So there, we're finished. We're going to water these in, and then we're going to stick them under the lights, but we're not going to stick them under a dome. Number one, they don't need it. And number two, if I try to stick them under a dome, it's not going to fit because we have the wicking mat and these are too tall. So let's get these watered in and under the lights. So there they are under lights. Now all I need to do is watch and hope for germination. It's an exciting time of year. Now the reason I put them under lights is as soon as they start sprouting, they need to have light, otherwise they stretch out too much. Now, I do work full-time right now. You know, it's my off season for landscape design, so I'm actually doing taxes. Yes, I do taxes also. Not my favorite, but it pays the bills. But anyway, I may not be home when they sprout to turn on the lights, so I just leave the lights on. So just like that, the 2024 planting season is underway, and I couldn't be more excited. Now I'd love to hear if you have any questions about seed planting, and love to hear what you're planting at this time of year. I know there are parts of the world where it's actually summer right now and you're in full planting mode. There's other areas where you can grow things over the winter. And there are some areas like mine where it's cold and snowy outside, so getting outside is not the same pleasant experience as it is in different times of the year. So let me know what you're planting. Hopefully this video has been helpful for you. If it has been helpful, I hope you like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and go have a wonderful gardening adventure.